Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Humans meet Galactic Empire. And immediately start roasting them. Supreme Commander Vex Tur Krell of the Galactic Empire stood rigidly on the observation deck of the Eternal Dominance flagship of the 7th Imperial Fleet. His 4 eyes, each a different shade of amber, narrowed as he watched the approaching vessel on the massive viewscreen. The ship was peculiar, bulky, asymmetrical, and frankly offensive to his refined aesthetic sensibilities. "What in the 7 moons of practice is that?" he demanded, his third arm gesturing dramatically at the screen while his primary arms remained clasped behind his back, as befitted his station. Senior Analyst Plex Raw cleared her throat nervously. "It appears to be the diplomatic vessel from the newly discovered species," she announced. "Supreme Commander, they call themselves humans," she added, pronouncing the word as if it might contaminate her mouth, "and they expect to meet the glory of the Galactic Empire." In that moment, Vex Tur's neck frills extended in disbelief. "It looks like they welded scrap metal to a garbage container and called it a spacecraft." The bridge crew maintained perfect silence when Supreme Commander Vexter was in one of his moods. Even breathing too loudly could result in demotion to waste reclamation duty on the Empire's prison moons. "Establish communication," he ordered, straightening his ceremonial cape adorned with 47 medals of conquest. "Let's see what these humans have to say for themselves." The viewscreen flickered, and the image of a human appeared. The creature had only 2 eyes, a pathetically inadequate number by Graxian standards, and its skin lacked any proper scales or protective plating. Vexter felt a wave of revulsion. How did such vulnerable creatures survive long enough to develop space flight? "Greetings from Earth and the United Systems Alliance," came the human's greeting. The human's face contorted in what Vexter would later learn was a smile. "I'm Captain Lena Rodriguez of the USS Audacity. We're thrilled to make first contact with your civilization." Vexter puffed up his chest scales in the traditional display of imperial superiority. "I am Supreme Commander Vexter Krell, 37th descendant of the Divine Emperor Krell the Magnificent, conqueror of the Orion Spiral, destroyer of the Zentari Rebellion, and rightful ruler of 2,719 star systems. You stand at the threshold of the Galactic Empire, the most powerful civilization in the known galaxy." He paused for effect. This was normally where new species began growling, or, at minimum, displaying appropriate terror. Instead, the human made an odd sound, a series of sharp exhalations. Was it choking? Having some kind of seizure? "Hey, sorry, Captain Rodriguez," she said, waving a hand. "It's just, wow, that's quite a title you've got there. Do you have to say the whole thing every time you introduce yourself? That must make for long meetings." Vexter froze, his neck frills fully extended in shock. Had this insignificant creature just laughed at him? "What is the weapons capability of the human vessel?" he hissed quietly. Senior Analyst Plex Raw consulted her datapad. "Minimal, Supreme Commander. Our scans indicate their shields would collapse under a single volley from our tertiary defense batteries." Vexter relaxed slightly. So these humans are not only disrespectful but also militarily insignificant, and perhaps this would be a simple conquest after all. "Captain Rodriguez," he said with dangerous calm, "the Galactic Empire welcomes you. We invite your diplomatic party aboard the Eternal Dominance for formal first contact procedures, according to the Imperial Protocol of New Species Integration." "Great," the human replied with inexplicable cheerfulness. "We'll send over our shuttle right away. Looking forward to meeting you face to face, Supreme Commander Vex Tur Krell, 37th Dessen. Actually, is it cool if I just call you Vex? That's a lot to remember." The bridge fell silent. No one had ever suggested shortening the Supreme Commander's title. At Vexter's eye twitched, "Prepare the reception hall," he ordered through clenched teeth, "and alert the Imperial Anthropological Division. These humans may be the most peculiar species we have ever encountered." Little did he know just how peculiar they would prove to be. The initial diplomatic meeting went awry. The imperial reception hall had been prepared according to the strictest traditions of the Galactic Empire. Massive banners, displaying the conquest of 15 civilizations, hung from ceiling to floor. The eternal flame of subjugation burned in its 40-foot ceremonial brazier. 200 imperial guards stood in perfect formation, their exoskeletons polished to a mirror shine. Supreme Commander Vexter surveyed the scene with satisfaction. This should adequately impress upon these humans their proper place in the galactic hierarchy, he remarked to Grand Diplomat Zoral Trang, whose jeweled head crest bobbed sagely with each nod. Indeed, Supreme Commander, new species typically require a display of our magnificence before negotiations can properly begin, Zoral replied, adjusting his ceremonial robes of office. I have prepared the standard terms of vassalage, they are quite generous for a species with such limited technology. The massive doors at the far end of the hall parted, and the human delegation entered. There were 5 of them, dressed in what appeared to be matching blue uniforms that lacked any proper ornamentation or indication of hierarchical status. How was one supposed to know which humans to ignore and which to address? Captain Rodriguez led the group, walking with a casual stride that completely disregarded the solemnity of the occasion. Wow, she exclaimed, her voice echoing inappropriately in the sacred hall. This place is something else. Looks like Versailles has had a baby with the Death Star. The other humans made those strange choking sounds again, laughing. Vexter reminded himself as he looked around at their expressions, which displayed amusement rather than awe. Welcome to the heart of the eternal dominance, Vexter intoned, his voice amplified by the ceremonial acoustics. You stand in the presence of the empire that has ruled this sector for 12,000 years. One of the humans, a stocky male with facial hair, whispered something to another, and they both erupted into poorly suppressed snickers. Vexter's left eye twitched. Is something amusing, human? Captain Rodriguez cleared her throat. Sorry, Supreme Commander. Lieutenant Jackson then pointed out, your Imperial Guards' helmets look exactly like an Earth kitchen appliance called a juicer. It's just a funny coincidence, Grand Diplomat Zoral gasped audibly. The Imperial Guard's armor had been designed by Emperor Krelthar himself and was considered the pinnacle of intimidating aesthetics. Silence. Vexter thundered. This is a sacred diplomatic ritual, you will show proper respect or face the consequences. Instead of cowering, Captain Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Sorry, but where we come from, diplomatic meetings usually start with coffee and handshakes, not threats of consequences. Maybe we should dial it back a notch. Another human, a tall female with dark skin, couldn't contain herself and let out a loud, hey, before covering her mouth. What now? Vexter demanded, his patience disintegrating. Nothing. Nothing, the woman said, composing herself. It's just that your neck frills fluff out when you're angry, it's kind of like when our cats get startled. It's cute, cute. Vexter's voice rose to a pitch that cracked one of the ceremonial crystal goblets. I am a supreme commander of the Galactic Empire. I have overseen the subjugation of 12 worlds. I am not cute. His outburst only made matters worse. Now all 5 humans were laughing openly, tears streaming down their faces. Grand Diplomat Zoral leaned over to Vexter. Supreme Commander, I believe this meeting is not proceeding according to protocol. Perhaps we should adjourn and reconsider our approach. Vexter, his neck frills fully extended in humiliation, could only nod in stunned agreement. Cultural misunderstanding had escalated following the disastrous initial meeting. Supreme Commander Vexter then called an emergency session of the Imperial Cultural Advisory Board. The 7 eldest Graxian scholars sat around an ancient table carved from the bones of the last Kraken of Alderaan, their withered faces grave with concern. These humans are unlike any species we have encountered, declared Chief Cultural Advisor Maren, her ancient voice crackling like dry leaves. They seem immune to our traditional methods of intimidation and respect-inducing protocols. Perhaps they are mentally deficient, suggested Scholar Krev Ney. Many primitive species laugh when confronted with concepts too complex for their underdeveloped brains. Vexter paced the chamber, his ceremonial cape swishing dramatically. Whatever the cause, we must regain control of this diplomatic situation. The Divine Emperor expects this sector to be fully subjugated by the next solar cycle. I recommend the Ritual of Imperial Magnificence, offered Scholar Dozar, the youngest of the advisors at merely 300 years old. No species has ever witnessed it without pledging eternal fealty. And so it was decided, the humans would be invited to observe the grandest, most awe-inspiring ceremony in the Graxian cultural arsenal, the Ritual of Imperial Magnificence. The ritual began at precisely the fourth chime of the celestial chronometer. Captain Rodriguez and her crew were positioned in the viewing gallery of the Grand Imperial Cathedral, a space so vast that small clouds had formed near its ceiling. "Welcome to the sacred ritual that has remained unchanged for 10,000 years, announced Grand Ritualist Pexmore. "You are privileged to be the first non-vassalized species to witness this display of Graxian cultural supremacy." The ritual began with 70 imperial vocalists emitting the harmonic drone of ancestral reverence, a sound somewhere between a foghorn and the mating call of a constipated moose. The humans exchanged glances, their lips twitching suspiciously. Next came the procession of historical dominance, where 200 soldiers marched in a pattern so complex it could only be properly appreciated from orbit. Unfortunately, from the humans' ground-level perspective, it appeared they were simply walking in circles while occasionally bumping into each other. Lieutenant Jackson leaned over to Captain Rodriguez. "It's like watching my nephew's kindergarten dance recital," he whispered, triggering a wave of poorly concealed snorts from the human delegation. The centerpiece of the ritual was the ascension of the imperial proxy ceremony, where a representative of the emperor was raised 60 feet in the air while reciting the 97 virtues of Graxian superiority. The complex pulley system, operated by 12 devoted acolytes, slowly hoisted ceremonial minister Trox Van upward. "Behold," Vexter announced proudly, "the physical manifestation of our cultural advancement." Just as Minister Trox Van reached the apex of his ascension, a cable slipped. The minister tilted dramatically to one side, his ceremonial headdress, weighing approximately 40 pounds, sliding over his face. In his blind panic, he grabbed for support, accidentally triggering the release of the sacred glitter of dominance, which, instead of gracefully showering down, dumped directly onto the minister's head, creating a sparkling cloud that followed him as he swung wildly back and forth. The humans lost all composure. Captain Rodriguez doubled over, gasping for breath between peals of laughter. Lieutenant Jackson actually fell out of his chair, and Communications Officer Wei had tears streaming down her face as she clutched her sides. "Enough!" Vexter roared, his voice echoing throughout the cathedral. "How dare you mock our sacred traditions?" Captain Rodriguez tried to respond but could only wave and gesture apologetically while continuing to laugh. "This is a diplomatic catastrophe," Grand Diplomat Zorel whispered urgently. "Supreme Commander, we must consult the Imperial protocols for handling unprecedented disrespect." Vexter, his neck frills fully extended in rage, pointed dramatically at the exit. "Remove them. This cultural exchange is over." As the humans were escorted out, still convulsing with laughter, Vexter could not shake the disturbing feeling that somehow the Graxian Empire had lost a battle. It didn't even know it was fighting. Humans demonstrated surprising technological capabilities. Supreme Commander Vexter stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, his posture rigid with suppressed fury. The diplomatic disaster weighed heavily on his mind, but more pressing concerns now demanded his attention. "Report," he snapped at Senior Analyst Plex Raw, who was frantically working at her console. "Supreme Commander, we're detecting unusual energy readings from the human vessel," she replied, her voice tinged with confusion. "They appear to be scanning us, but that's impossible, their technology is far too primitive to penetrate our defensive shielding." Vexter narrowed his 4 eyes. "Show me the main view screen." The screen displayed a technical readout of the human ship. What had initially appeared to be decorative elements or structural weaknesses now emitted complex energy patterns that somehow bypassed the Empire's most sophisticated counterintelligence measures. "How are they doing this?" Vexter demanded. Fleet technologist Dravik adjusted his mechanical third eye, worry evident as it focused. Supreme Commander, it appears the humans have disguised their advanced technology within a seemingly crude exterior design. It's quite ingenious. Actually, you sound impressed, Vexter said dangerously. Dravik's neck frills flattened in submission as he made his objective observation. Supreme Commander, the communications officer interrupted, incoming transmission from the human vessel. On the screen, Captain Rodriguez appeared looking surprisingly formal compared to her previous appearances. Supreme Commander Vexter, she said, despite our cultural differences, we'd like to continue diplomatic relations. Perhaps a technology exchange would help us understand each other better. We've taken the liberty of sending you some basic specifications of our ship's propulsion system as a gesture of goodwill. Vexter gestured for the data to be accepted, fully expecting to see primitive nuclear fusion or perhaps early antimatter containment designs. Instead, the technical schematics that appeared on the screen caused Dravik to gasp audibly. Is this accurate? Vexter demanded. Dravik's hands trembled as he analyzed the data. If these specifications are correct, their basic propulsion system utilizes principles of quantum folding that our scientists have only theorized about. They've solved the Crovex's instability problem that has stumped our engineers for centuries. On the screen, Captain Rodriguez smiled innocently. We noticed your ship still uses traditional warp technology. Our quantum fold drives are much more energy efficient. We'd be happy to help you upgrade your fleet. Help upgrade the Imperial fleet? Vexter felt his pride being strangled by the sudden, uncomfortable realization that these laughing and disrespectful creatures might actually possess technology beyond the Empire's capabilities. That's generous, he managed to reply, but the Imperial fleet requires no assistance. Captain Rodriguez nodded, her expression neutral, though her eyes twinkled with what Vexter now recognized as barely suppressed amusement. Of course, just a friendly offer. By the way, we've also noticed your ship has some interesting weapons systems. Mind if we send over our security chief, Commander Blake, to discuss potential mutual defense strategies? Before Vexter could respond, the view widened to show another human standing beside Rodriguez. Commander Blake nodded professionally, but the real shock came from what stood beside her, a fully operational KT-9000 combat droid, the exact model that represented the pinnacle of Graxian military technology, the very model that was supposed to be the Empire's most closely guarded secret. We've been manufacturing these for training exercises, Commander Blake said casually, patting the droid's shoulder. Our engineers made some improvements to the targeting systems. The original design had a slight vulnerability in the primary sensor array. We fixed that for you. Senior analyst Plex Raw turned to Vexter, her expression horrified. Supreme Commander, that model was only deployed 2 lunar cycles ago. There's no way they could have acquired it, reverse engineered it, improved it, and manufactured their own versions in that time frame, unless, Vexter realized with growing dread, they have been observing the Empire for far longer than anyone suspected, unless their apparent primitiveness is an elaborate deception, unless these humans, with their constant laughter and casual disregard for protocol, are actually far more dangerous than the Empire had imagined. I believe, Vexter said slowly, we should reconsider our approach to these negotiations. Empire attempts intimidation tactics that backfire. After an emergency session of the Imperial War Council, a new strategy was devised. If diplomacy and cultural displays have failed, perhaps a demonstration of raw military might will put these humans in their place. The Graxian Empire has subjugated countless civilizations through intimidation. Surely these humans, despite their surprising technology, would respond to a proper show of force. Send in the dreadnoughts, Vexter commanded. Within hours, 5 massive Imperial dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace, positioning themselves in an attack formation around the single human vessel. Each dreadnought was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapon systems capable of reducing planets to molten slag. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, Vexter allowed himself a satisfied smile. He opened a channel to the human ship. When Captain Rodriguez appeared on screen, she looked completely unconcerned by the armada surrounding her vessel. In fact, she appeared to be eating something casually, bringing small brown discs to her mouth. "Oh hey there, Supreme Commander," she said cheerfully. "Sorry about the snack, we're having what we call cookies to celebrate First Contact Day. Would you like us to send some over?" "Our chef makes amazing chocolate chip," another human offered. "No." Vexter ignored the irrelevant food discussion. "Captain Rodriguez, you now find yourself surrounded by the 7th Imperial Battle Group. Each dreadnought carries enough firepower to obliterate your vessel 1,000 times over. Perhaps now you understand the might of the Galactic Empire."